smile that never reached his eyes. For the Pentagon presentation tomorrow, Martin, I think it's better if you sit this one out. The conference room went dead silent. Every head turned to watch me absorb that punch. I'd spent 8 months building this defense contract proposal, knew every specification, every tolerance, every deadline. I looked at Brandon Whitman, our new CEO, then at the polished table reflecting the overhead lights. My safety glasses needed adjusting. I pushed them up my nose, a habit from 15 years on the production floor. The silence stretched like a failing bearing under stress. Someone's coffee cup clinked against the marble surface. The HVAC system cycled on with that familiar mechanical hum. Brandon's assistant shuffled papers nervously. Our quality control manager, Jenny Rodriguez, stared at her laptop screen like it held the secrets of the universe. I could hear the production line humming 3 floors below us, machines I'd calibrated personally, running specifications I'd written. I nodded once, closed my project folder, and said, "Copy that." The words came out flat and professional. Brandon's smile widened, thinking he'd accomplished something. The engineering team shifted in their chairs, uncomfortable but silent. I stood up slowly, letting my chair roll back exactly 2 inches. My work boots clicked against the polished floor as I walked toward the glass door. 20 pairs of eyes tracked my movement. I could feel the optical sensors burning into my back. As I reached for the door handle, the system parameters shifted. I wasn't just leaving the room. I was about to execute a complete operational shutdown, and Brandon had no idea what sequence he'd just initiated. My name is Martin Sullivan. I'm 49 years old, and I've been operations director at Precision Works for 15 years. I walked past the engineering bay where my team pretended to focus on their CAD workstations, forced productivity, diverted attention protocols. Someone typed furiously to avoid making eye contact. The quality control department had gone completely quiet. Coffee cups sat cooling on desks. Even the CNC machines seemed to have reduced their operational frequency. 30 faces monitored my progress down the longest corridor of my career. I recognized each expression as I passed the individual workstations. Concern from Tommy Burke in fabrication, confusion from the junior engineers, relief from the supervisors, grateful their names weren't on Brandon's termination protocols. The smell of cutting fluid and metal shavings hung in the air like industrial fog. My security badge beeped at the turnstile. The sound echoed too loudly in the sudden operational quiet. I maintained standard posture and consistent velocity, professional until the final checkout. In the elevator, I pressed the ground floor button and watched the floor indicators light up in sequence. My phone pinged in my jacket pocket. I pulled it out and saw a calendar notification. The message made my stomach drop into emergency mode. Pentagon final presentation, security clearance required. Internal prep meeting scheduled. The very presentation I was now excluded from attending. The presentation I'd engineered from raw specifications. The presentation that would either secure our quarter or shut us down permanently. Brandon had just excluded the only person with the required security clearance from presenting to the Pentagon. I stared at the screen as the elevator descended through operational levels. Floor 12, 11, 10. By the time I reached the lobby, my response protocol was crystal clear. I walked through the glass doors of Precision Works for what might be the last time under current management. The October air hit my face like a system reset. I'd been with the company for 15 years. 15 years of 60-hour weeks, client specifications, and weekend quality control checks. I'd never missed a production deadline, never failed a quality audit, never backed down from an impossible tolerance requirement. 15 years of building manufacturing processes that delivered $2.8 million in annual defense contracts. 15 years of staying late to calibrate equipment while others went home to their families. 15 years of being the person leadership called when specifications became critical and timelines became impossible. Brandon Whitman had been CEO for exactly 3 weeks. 3 weeks of management consulting buzzwords and efficiency optimization theories. 3 weeks of calling me the floor supervisor when I presented operational insights that could revolutionize our entire production capacity. He treated manufacturing like a spreadsheet exercise instead of precision engineering. I sat on the bench outside our facility and opened my phone's security folder. My thumbs hovered over the keypad for exactly 5 seconds. Then I accessed the file labeled Pentagon Contract Security Requirements, the clearance documentation I'd negotiated during the initial specification review, the documentation Brandon had never bothered to read. The documentation that required the project lead to maintain continuous security oversight or the vendor could be automatically disqualified. I closed my phone and felt my facial muscles relax for the first time in weeks. Brandon thought I was just a production supervisor. He had no idea I'd built the entire security framework. 2 weeks earlier, I'd sat in the Pentagon's sterile conference room with their procurement team. The coffee was military-grade terrible, but the conversation was mission-critical. They wanted accountability, continuity, someone who understood their specifications from discovery through delivery. "We need security clearance maintenance throughout the project cycle," their procurement officer, Colonel Hayes, had stated. "Too many contractors switch personnel after they win the bid." The fluorescent lights buzzed softly while I considered their operational requirement. Defense contractors had burned them before with bait-and-switch personnel tactics. Their last vendor had promised their best engineers, then delivered junior staff and cookie-cutter solutions that failed field testing. I pulled out my contract documentation folder. "We can add a security clearance continuity clause. If our cleared project lead isn't present for the final presentation, you have grounds to disqualify us entirely." Colonel Hayes smiled with military precision. "Outstanding. That gives our procurement team operational confidence." I drafted the language carefully using standard military specification format. Clear parameters that couldn't be misinterpreted. The project lead with active security clearance must attend the final presentation to ensure specification alignment and security protocol compliance. Not a trap, just good operational security. I emailed the signed documentation to our legal department that same afternoon. The subject line read, "Pentagon security requirements, mission critical." I copied Brandon on the email, along with our head of engineering, Paul Martinez. Brandon never responded, never opened the document, never read a single specification about the clause that was about to cost him everything. Brandon's first all-hands meeting was pure theater, polished presentation slides, sharp suit, and a PowerPoint full of optimization promises. He called the manufacturing team support personnel and promised to elevate our operational efficiency with his leadership methodology. When I presented production insights that could increase our capacity by 23%, he cut me off mid-sentence. "Thanks for the input, Martin," he said, with that same cold efficiency. "Let's focus on execution metrics instead of theoretical analysis." The room went quiet. I felt my jaw muscles tighten behind my professional expression. Brandon had just dismissed 6 months of production optimization research in front of the entire company. Research that had identified 3 new efficiency opportunities and located 2 critical bottlenecks in our current workflow. The silence felt heavy with operational tension. Paul Martinez cleared his throat awkwardly. Our project managers exchanged glances that communicated everything about Brandon's collaborative leadership approach. After the meeting, I walked back to my workstation and opened the Pentagon project folder. 847 pages of specifications, production requirements, and delivery timelines. Brandon hadn't accessed it once. The server logs showed 0 views from his account. I closed my laptop and stared at the production floor through my office window. Brandon was about to walk into the biggest presentation of the quarter without reading the specifications, without understanding the client requirements, without knowing what operational promises we could actually deliver. That's when I stopped trying to rescue people who wouldn't rescue themselves. Brandon wanted to run the operation. He could own the operational results too. The presentation prep meeting was a complete system failure. Brandon had replaced my carefully researched technical specifications with flashy graphics and management theory, revenue projections with no engineering foundation, production timelines that ignored physical reality, style over substance in every slide. I raised my hand during the technical review. "What's our response protocol if they ask for stress testing documentation on the hydraulic components?" Brandon waved me off with visible irritation. "We'll figure it out during the presentation. Sometimes you just have to trust the process." Paul Martinez, our head of engineering, looked uncomfortable. "Brandon, they specifically requested metallurgy reports and quality control documentation. Martin built comprehensive testing protocols." Brandon's voice had developed an edge. "Are we engineers or not? We'll figure it out." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 5 degrees. Brandon's jaw was set in that stubborn configuration I'd learned to recognize. His fingers drummed against the conference table like a mechanical counter approaching failure tolerance. I looked around the room. Half the engineering team was staring at their laptops. The other half was staring at me, waiting to see if I'd push back against faulty operational logic. I didn't. Instead, I closed my project folder and made a tactical decision. I wasn't going to ghost raid a rescue operation for someone who'd erased my name from my own engineering work. Brandon wanted to own the presentation. He could own the consequences too. I filed my vacation request that afternoon, fully compliant, fully earned time off. I'd been banking vacation days for months, and this seemed like the optimal time to utilize them. My handover documentation was military precise. Every client specification, every project timeline, every technical requirement organized and cross-referenced. I even included the Pentagon folder Brandon had never opened. HR thanked me for maintaining such professional standards during the operational transition. I signed the paperwork, cleared out my workstation, and walked away without generating drama. I removed myself from the project communication channels and watched the status updates disappear from my phone. My calendar went blank. The operational urgency stopped completely. No red flag emails in my inbox, no crisis calls during lunch, no weekend emergencies that somehow became my responsibility to solve. For the first time in 15 years, I had complete operational silence. No client specifications, no urgent technical reviews, no last-minute engineering modifications, just space to recalibrate. I sat in my garage workshop that evening and opened my laptop. My original presentation was still there, the real one. The one built on solid engineering data and honest production timelines, the one Brandon had scrapped for flashy marketing graphics. I closed the laptop without making modifications. Brandon wanted to run his own operation. He could write his own technical specifications too. The coffee shop was quiet at 10 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. I'd scheduled this meeting with Colonel Hayes 3 weeks ago, long before Brandon decided I was operationally unnecessary, just a routine specification review to clarify technical requirements. Colonel Hayes slid into the booth across from me with military punctuality. "Thanks for making time, Martin. I know you must be swamped with final preparations. We reviewed the project specifications, their quality requirements, their delivery schedule concerns. All the technical details Brandon's flashy presentation had ignored. Colonel Hayes took notes with military precision and asked technical questions that demonstrated actual engineering understanding. He pulled out a leather portfolio organized with military efficiency. Pentagon procurement ran their specification process like a tactical operation. Everything documented, every requirement justified, every contractor held to identical standards. "I really appreciate that security clearance continuity clause you suggested," he said, adding sugar to his coffee with measured precision. It addressed our procurement team's primary concern about personnel switching. I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. "Makes sense from an operational security perspective." He smiled with military approval. "Absolutely. See you at the presentation tomorrow. I'm looking forward to seeing how everything integrates." I stirred my coffee once and maintained operational silence. Colonel Hayes had no idea that the person who'd engineered the entire security framework wouldn't be in the room. Brandon was about to learn what happens when you ignore technical specifications. My garage workshop was completely quiet that night. No client calls, no urgent modifications, no last-minute specification changes. I sat at my workbench with my laptop open, looking at the presentation I'd built. Every chart represented real data. Every recommendation solved an actual engineering problem. Every timeline was achievable because I'd mapped out every production step. It was honest engineering built on solid technical foundation. I placed my hands on the keyboard, then closed the laptop without typing a single character. I would not ghostwrite a rescue operation for someone who deleted my name from my own technical work. The silence felt different now. Not empty, but full of potential. For the first time in months, I wasn't anticipating the next crisis or preparing for the next emergency modification. My phone buzzed at 11:47 p.m., a text from Paul Martinez. "We're good for tomorrow, right?" I stared at the message for a long time. Paul was a decent engineer caught in Brandon's operational chaos. He'd tried to defend my technical work in the prep meeting. He deserved an honest response, but honesty cuts both ways. I typed back, "I'm on approved vacation." Brandon has everything he needs. Paul didn't respond. I turned off my phone and went to bed. Tomorrow, Brandon would present my engineering work without understanding it. He'd make promises without knowing if our production capacity could deliver them. Sometimes the best lesson is the one you let people teach themselves. I wasn't in the room, but I could picture it with engineering precision. Brandon walking in with his confident smile, the Pentagon team sitting around their briefing table, PowerPoint slides glowing on the wall-mounted display. I was in my garage calibrating my drill press when my phone started buzzing. Paul's first text came at 10:47 a.m. Meeting paused. Then they're asking about the security clearance documentation. Then Brandon's trying to explain why you're not here. I set my phone down and continued adjusting the drill press chuck. The bearing assembly needed attention. It had been running slightly off specification lately, probably picking up vibration from the workshop's concrete foundation. The morning sunlight streamed through my garage windows, highlighting metal dust particles that danced like tiny precision instruments. My workshop seemed more organized already, freed from the negative operational stress I'd been bringing home every day. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a longer technical report. Colonel Hayes is reading from their procurement policy, something about contractor compliance requirements. Brandon looks like his system just crashed. I smiled despite myself. Brandon probably had no idea what Colonel Hayes was referencing. He'd never read the contract specifications, never opened the Pentagon folder, never bothered to understand what operational framework he was walking into. Another notification. They've called a 48-hour postponement pending compliance review. I finished calibrating my drill press and sat down with a cup of coffee. Brandon was learning an expensive lesson about preparation protocols. Paul called me from a stairwell, his voice barely above a whisper. They pulled out the actual contract documentation. "Martin, there's a clause about security clearance continuity. Brandon's furious. He's calling you insubordinate." I stirred sugar into my coffee and kept my voice at standard operational levels. "I'm on approved vacation, Paul. The clause came from their procurement requirements, not from me, but you knew about it. I documented it. I emailed about it. I copied Brandon on all specifications." What he chose to read was his operational decision. Paul was quiet for a moment. I heard voices in the background. Brandon shouting something about team loyalty protocols. Colonel Hayes' calm voice explaining procurement compliance requirements. The sound of chairs scraping against conference room floors. "Paul, I need to go," I said. "But you should know the Pentagon is copying our board of directors on all correspondence now. This isn't just about one meeting anymore." I hung up and finished my coffee in operational silence. Brandon wanted to make this about loyalty. He was about to learn what real accountability looked like. The rescheduled meeting was a complete operational failure. I heard about it from 3 different sources, each report worse than the last. Brandon had opened with a joke that died in complete silence. Then Colonel Hayes asked him to walk through basic stress testing protocols from the engineering specifications. Brandon stalled. Hemmed and hawed, promised to send follow-up documentation after the meeting. Colonel Hayes' response was military direct. "We already reviewed Martin's stress testing protocols. We were hoping to discuss implementation specifications." Brandon had no idea what protocols he meant. He'd never opened the engineering folder, never read my technical documentation, never understood that the Pentagon had already reviewed detailed metallurgy reports weeks ago. The meeting ended with the Pentagon declaring no decision and reopening the RFP process. They cited vendor non-compliance with security requirements. By 5 p.m., our company communication channels were exploding with damage control messages, emergency team meetings, crisis communication protocols, all hands on deck. My inbox pinged once, an email from the board's audit committee requesting an independent technical review of the failed presentation. I read it twice, then closed my laptop. Brandon's operational arrogance was about to become everyone's problem. The audit committee's conference room was small and quiet, with ventilation that made everything feel confidential. Patricia Wells spread my email documentation across the table like technical evidence. "Walk me through the operational timeline," she said. I pulled out my project folder and opened to the specification summary. Pentagon requested security clearance continuity during initial contract negotiations. I drafted compliance language, got engineering approval, sent documentation to legal and leadership. Patricia nodded, taking notes with mechanical precision. Brandon's response, no acknowledgement, no questions about implementation requirements. I showed her the email thread. Brandon copied on every message, 0 replies from his account, 0 opens of the attached technical documents. Day of the presentation, I was excluded 3 weeks after the security clause was finalized. Brandon said it was better I not be there for the company's biggest operational opportunity. Patricia leaned back in her chair with calculated precision. He excluded the only person required to be present. I nodded. The Pentagon did exactly what their procurement policy said they'd do. Patricia closed her folder and looked at me directly. "Would you be willing to act as an outside consultant for a broader review of our operational management processes?" I considered it, then nodded. "If it helps the company learn from this operational failure." I formed Sullivan Engineering Solutions on a Tuesday morning with a basic logo and clean invoice template. Simple, professional, ready to serve clients who valued specifications over presentations. My first contract came from a mid-market aerospace manufacturer, the kind of account I'd never been allowed to touch in my old position. Brandon had always insisted we focus on large defense opportunities. The aerospace CEO was refreshingly direct. "We don't need flashy presentations. We need someone who understands our production challenges and can build real solutions." I spent the week in their facility talking to machinists and quality control operators, learning how their operation actually functioned instead of how executives thought it functioned. No buzzwords, no empty optimization promises, just careful observation and honest engineering analysis. Meanwhile, my phone buzzed with updates about Precision Works. The board had scheduled formal interviews about the failed Pentagon presentation. People were asking uncomfortable questions about operational accuracy and leadership preparation. I sent my first invoice to the aerospace company and felt my system pressure normalize. Building felt better than burning. Creating operational value felt better than pointing fingers. Brandon could keep the corporate drama. I'd take the engineering work. The board interview room felt like a quality control inspection. Patricia Wells sat across from me with two other directors, all holding comprehensive documentation folders. "Walk us through your version of events," Patricia said. I opened my timeline document. Clean, factual data. No editorial comments, just dates, emails, and documented operational decisions. I never used the word incompetent. I said inadequately prepared. I never called Brandon arrogant. I described his decisions as unsupported by technical documentation. I never attacked his character. I let his operational choices speak for themselves. The board took notes, asked clarifying questions, and requested copies of all technical documentation. Professional, thorough, fair. "One more thing," Patricia said as we finished. "We'd like you to review our current project documentation. Third-party perspective on operational accuracy." I nodded. "I can do that. We're particularly interested in projects marked as production-ready without completed quality testing." I kept my expression neutral, but my system pressure spiked. Quality control shortcuts were one of the oldest problems in manufacturing management. If Brandon had been playing that game, the board was about to uncover a much bigger operational crisis. 6 months later, Sullivan Engineering Solutions had grown to 8 technical consultants. We'd won 4 more clients through referrals from the aerospace manufacturer. Word travels fast in engineering circles when you deliver what you promise. I got a LinkedIn message from Paul Martinez. He'd landed at a startup that valued his technical expertise and problem-solving capabilities. "Thanks for showing me what professional integrity looks like," he wrote. 3 of the engineers who'd left Precision Works reached out about joining my team. Good technical people who'd been caught in Brandon's operational chaos. Now free to do their best work, I hired all 3. Precision Works eventually stabilized under new management. They brought in a CEO who read technical documentation, valued engineering expertise, and understood that manufacturing requires both vision and execution capability. I ran into the new CEO at an industry conference. She shook my hand and said, "I've heard good things about your work with that aerospace contract. Maybe we could collaborate on something sometime." I smiled and handed her my business card. I'd be open to that conversation. No grudges, no operational drama, just 2 professionals discussing value creation for clients. That's how adults handle business relationships. The aerospace manufacturer became our anchor client. What started as a small contract grew into a comprehensive engineering partnership. They introduced us to 4 other companies in their supply chain network. Colonel Hayes was promoted to procurement director, partly based on his success with contractor management protocols. He sent me a bottle of bourbon with a note. "Thanks for teaching us the value of security clearance continuity requirements." I kept the bottle on my workshop shelf as a reminder. Good operational practices protect everyone involved. Today, I sit in my expanded workshop, watching my team solve complex engineering problems for clients who trust us completely. The walls are lined with thank you notes from companies we've helped, not awards for flashy presentations. My calendar is full, but it's full of meaningful work. Engineering consultations that lead to real solutions. Client meetings where we listen more than we talk. Project reviews where we celebrate what we've actually delivered. No one calls me floor supervisor here. No one excludes me from presenting my own technical work. No one questions my operational value while depending on my engineering expertise. I built this place one honest specification at a time, one delivered promise at a time, one client relationship built on trust instead of marketing presentations. Look, if you're reading this and you've been in a similar spot, here's what I learned. Your expertise has value, even when management doesn't recognize it. Your preparation matters, even when they want to wing it. And sometimes the best move isn't fighting the system, it's building a better one. Don't let anyone convince you that experience doesn't matter or that flashy presentations beat solid engineering. They don't. The market will sort it out eventually, and when it does, you want to be the guy who actually knows what he's doing. Trust your technical knowledge, document everything, and never apologize for being thorough. The Pentagon doesn't award contracts to people who guess their way through specifications, and neither should you.